All right, let's jump right into this fascinating explainer. Today we're exploring a really comprehensive source analysis that details how a banished teenager rose from absolute ruin to become the supreme leader of China. The source material paints this incredible picture of strategic patience, political maneuvering, and sheer survival. It's a deep dive into the literal mechanics of power, so let's get right to it.
To understand this incredible journey, the source material breaks it all down into 6 distinct phases. The collapse under Mao, a masterclass in patience. The rural governance strategy, the Shanghai corruption test, consolidating absolute power, and finally, the dictator's dilemma.
Phase 1, the collapse under Mao.
We have to start right where the source begins, which is the absolute mind-boggling chaos of Mao Zedong's China in the late 1960s. The data points to a staggering number. Up to 40 million people died during the Great Famine. And this wasn't some natural disaster. The research makes it very clear that this was the direct fallout of Mao's radical agricultural and industrial policies, famously known as the Great Leap Forward. It was an era where families just crumbled, and entire villages literally vanished from starvation.
To give you an idea of the sheer disconnect happening at the time, the source points out Mao's impossible steel quotas. He wanted production to jump from about 6 million to 150 million tons of steel. But here's the kicker. He gave the people absolutely no iron to work with. So what happened? Families were literally forced to melt down their only farming tools, their cooking pots, even their kids' toys. And the tragic result was just piles of entirely useless, low-quality scrap metal. They were left completely unable to cook or farm.
And adding fuel to the fire, the analysis details how the state enforced this fake science called Lysenkoism. They basically forced farmers to plant seeds impossibly close together and plow so deeply that it completely destroyed the soil. The drop in grain output was massive, plummeting from 200 million down to 143 million tons. But here is the truly wild part. While millions were actively starving, the government actually doubled their grain exports. Why? Just to maintain international optics, to project this total illusion of prosperity. It created an environment where pure survival meant societal trust was entirely replaced by fear and betrayal.
Phase 2, a masterclass in patience.
It was right into this absolute nightmare that a 15-year-old boy named Xi Jinping was exiled. He was the disgraced son of a purged party official, literally thrown out of Beijing and into a rural village with zero electricity, sleeping on flea-infested beds. But the crucial takeaway here is how he responded. The source maps out this incredibly slow, deliberate timeline. Instead of fighting the system, he realized power had to come from within it. So from doing grueling manual labor back in 1968 to finally earning party membership in 1974 and then getting into the elite Tsinghua University, he meticulously, step by step, rebuilt his entire life.
The source highlights this idea perfectly. Rejection wasn't the end. Rejection was just information. Xi applied to join the Communist Party multiple times and kept getting rejected because of his father's disgraced status. But he didn't see those rejections as failures. Instead, the analysis emphasizes that he used them as pure intelligence, figuring out exactly what the system was afraid of and exactly what he needed to project to finally get in.
Which brings us to Phase 3, the rural governance strategy. Let's fast forward a bit to 1982. In a move that totally confused a lot of people, Xi intuitively leaves the dangerous, shifting political winds of Beijing for the unglamorous mud of a poor rural province called Hebei. The source outlines his highly effective semi-suburban economic model he deployed there in Zhengding County. He basically used 4 tactical interventions: shifting farmers to high-value produce, providing government greenhouses, creating direct sales channels to urban consumers, and rolling out performance-based rewards. He wasn't playing capital politics, he was doing the gritty, unglamorous work of fixing the economy from the ground up.
And wow, did it work! As a direct result of those pragmatic, on-the-ground policies, the analysis notes that Zhengding's GDP and per capita income have grown over 300 times since 1978. To put that into perspective, it's a total economic transformation. By doing this, he successfully branded himself, not as a political threat to the big players in Beijing, but as an invisible, highly effective governor who actually knew how to run things.
Phase 4, the Shanghai corruption test.
That exact reputation as a capable, humble guy led to his next massive opportunity in 2006. The context here is absolutely critical. The 2008 Beijing Olympics were supposed to be China's big global propaganda win, their big coming-out party. But just 2 years prior, the party chief of Shanghai, which is China's financial capital, gets caught embezzling $400 million from the city's pension fund.
The party desperately needed a scandal-free leader to step in and stabilize the city.
The source details how Xi stepped into this total chaos and just executed with surgical precision. He immediately declined luxury privileges and private villas, and he canceled all the lavish ceremonies. That stabilized his public image overnight. Then, he actively reassured nervous foreign investors and pushed tech giants like Alibaba to set up their operations there. And get this, despite all the massive political upheaval from the scandal, he maintained a staggering 12.9% economic growth rate. He proved, beyond a doubt, that he could handle the biggest stages.
Phase 5. Consolidating absolute power.
That undeniable success in Shanghai essentially earned him a golden ticket to the very top. But, as the explainer points out, climbing the peak of Chinese politics means navigating an incredibly exclusive and cutthroat structure. The source visualizes the Communist Party as this drastically shrinking pyramid. You start with thousands of delegates, then the Central Committee, the Politburo, down to just 7 people on the Inner Circle Standing Committee, and finally 1 General Secretary. The analysis notes Xi was elevated to that inner circle and eventually to the very top in 2012, largely because his rivals made a massive miscalculation. They looked at his history of rural service and thought he was humble, unambitious, and easily controllable. They literally thought he'd be a puppet.
Well, boy, were they wrong. Once he secured that top spot of General Secretary, the explainer notes he unleashed an absolutely brutal firing spree. It was masked as this sweeping anti-corruption push, but the source describes it as a strategic banner. Under this banner, he systematically eliminated potential rivals, disappeared top military generals, and completely neutralized any political competitors.
The data backing this up is pretty striking. Just look at the massive shift in loyalty by his second term. He maneuvered the board so effectively that a full 60% of Politburo members now had direct personal ties to him. He wasn't just leading the system anymore, He was completely rewiring the entire thing around himself.
Which leads us to our final phase, phase 6, the dictator's dilemma. This brings us to a really chilling part of the source's analysis, where Xi completely rewrites the foundational rules of modern China. In 2018, he essentially secured the ability to rule forever. He enshrined Xi Jinping thought into law, making his ideas practically unquestionable. And the source highlights the sheer magnitude of this power grab. He eliminated presidential term limits entirely, with absolutely zero opposition. In a room of 3,000 delegates, not a single person dared to vote against him. The fear of disagreeing was just absolute.
Yet, the analysis forces us to confront a highly complex reality. When you look at the growth comparison, China has vastly outpaced both the US and India during this period. So, while establishing this incredibly deep authoritarian control, his regime has simultaneously delivered massive economic results. The source makes it clear that this highly centralized control has generated unprecedented domestic prosperity.
And when you combine that massive economic engine with aggressive geopolitical expansion, well, you get today's reality. The source frames him as a highly calculated leader. He's leveraging a dominant manufacturing base, controlling 30% of global manufacturing, and dominating solar and EV battery supply chains to fuel aggressive military posturing. We're talking building artificial islands in the South China Sea, crushing Hong Kong's democracy, and openly threatening Taiwan. He is a leader who learned the literal mechanics of absolute power by watching his own country tear itself apart decades ago, and he has applied those exact lessons with systematic, ruthless precision.
Which leaves us with the exact provocative question the source poses to define the 21st century. Can a system built on fear and control keep delivering prosperity forever? Will that balance actually hold? That is the defining question we take away from this explainer today. Thank you so much for joining me as we unpack this source material, and as always, keep questioning the structures of power around you.